Okay, so the 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 render window is kind of a live thing. You guys should know a little bit about that. And again, I don't know everything about it, but when you go to this menu, you can see a few options. You can save to many different file types, many of which we probably will never use. For the most part, what we're going to use for our purposes is just a standard straight render, and that's this one right here. What you should also be aware of very clearly is that there's also a render region in a scene, which is like amazing because Maxwell for Rhino can take quite a bit of time to do a render. So if you just do a little chunk, that's great. And it can also render a blow up. So those are the three functions we're probably going to use the most. Rendering the scene, I'm hoping that this computer has enough hardware to run these properly. But anyway, so when you click that, what it's going to do is it's going to process and pull up a window on, obviously, my other screen like it does for everything. And it starts to render it. So what you should be aware of is that the Rhino render interface is, I don't know if you would consider it a ray trace renderer, but it kind of functions like one in a way, where it kind of does it through these like buffering passes. And what I can say to you guys right now is that the time left is almost never accurate. So let me see if I can get that all on screen here. Right up here, you've got a lot of information about what it's processing. Okay. And you notice that it was really fuzzy at first, and it kind of is less fuzzy now. It's been working for a minute, and it says that it's going to be working for the next 11 and a half hours. In reality, what was happening with on my workstation, which is probably a little bit better than these desktops, it was telling me that it was going to take something like 19 hours, and in reality, it took about an hour. So again, specifically with Maxwell, I'm not the expert in specifically Maxwell, but that does happen with a lot of rendering software packages. But what you should know is that it takes a very short amount of time to get up to the level of like a draft quality render that's actually pretty decent. If you can see here, it may be a little fuzzy, and in fact for you guys it's probably equally as fuzzy as anything else that shows on this projector, but if you wanted to, you could come around and see it on my screen or just test it out on yours. But it's a little bit fuzzy, but generally speaking you can see the architectural quality of the model just by hitting run like that. What I do want to point out is that here you can start to see a lot of the surfaces being reflected on one another, which is really sharp. So that's why using proper materials and stuff is going to be really strong for us. Let's see. I want to. You can stop it sort of mid render. So if I just click that stop button, it's going to write the file because it's already defaulted to write this file somewhere else, and then you can either export it, so you can save it as an image file here and just export it to whatever you want. Or you can mess around with it. So the cool thing is, and where are they? Where are those settings? Camera. Yeah. All right. So over here in camera, and guys, you're going to have to just bear with me on this. It's really hard to read all that text over there. But there's a little tab down the bottom left corner that's called camera. And so there's render options and there's camera. This image is a live image, like I said. We can kind of edit it and sort of process it as if we're sort of developing the film in a way. So we can increase ISO here, so we can increase the ISO to brighten it or darken it a little bit. We can increase the shutter speed or decrease the shutter speed. Those are kind of two very simple ones. focal length, I don't think we're going to be able to modify that in a live manner, but we can tint it with color. You know, and so what you're seeing down the bottom is the modification of it. You can give it a color burn. I will say this, guys, most of these things that you're doing here are not going to be necessary for most applications. But what you will find is that having a small adjustment, if your image comes out a little bit too burnt out or a little bit dull, is actually going to be really useful for us. We are going to discuss some best practices for certain materiality, and one of the things that I wanted to discuss with you about this is that what you can see back there is our image is, generally speaking, pretty flat. The materials we've chosen in the sun location is what am I trying to say with this? I'm blanking. I can't think of the word. Anyway, so what we want to do here is reduce some of the burning of lighting and stuff like that, so we can change the sun settings to kind of be a little bit less intense for certain angles. So I'm going to I don't need to save this image. I'm going to go back to my model here and give you just kind of one quick tip that I want you to be aware of as you go forward. So notably, you should be aware that the power of the sun generally is a little too intense at 100%, or a value of 1.0. So when I'm doing a processed sun, I usually bump this down to like a 0.9 or something like that, and that generally will help a lot. In some cases, I'll go down even to like a 0.75, and then I'll increase ISO or something like that. So let's do another quick little draft render. I'm going to let this thing run for just a couple minutes, and then and then I'll do a quick post process, and you can see a little bit of the difference, I guess, perhaps. So are there any questions on this so far? None? Okay. Yes. No? Okay. I thought you raised your hand. Okay, you have a question. What's up?
Mine is still like blurry. Is that just because it's still rendering?
Yes.
Okay, because it says rendering 0%. So.
Yeah, it'll say 0% for a very long time. I don't know. I'm still kind of trying to figure out some of those best practices for how to really read what level it's actually at. I find that Maxwell's not very accurate with its estimates. So anyway, one of the things you guys can kind of see now is, even though it's still a little bit flat, you can get a little bit more of a sense of the sky versus the ocean versus the land here. It's a little bit more contrasted. I'm going to stop this at a very, very drafty level like this and go back into camera settings and just bump the ISO up a little bit. Let's see. Refresh that. And there we go. That looks really blue up there. It doesn't look so blue on my screen. But anyway, so all I really tried to do was bring out some of the brightness of these elements behind. So I bumped up the ISO a little bit. I brought down or up. I brought up the shutter speed so that it was a little bit dimmer and it didn't receive as much light. And then I increased the color temperature a little bit so that it was more of a cool gray, which would bring some of those whites out a little bit more. So anyway, we're going to play around with a few of those things, but I will say this, guys, you're going to want to adjust these things drastically and dramatically, but keep it simple, keep it small. I would say any more than like 1 to 3% of that bar is like the range, like your minimum and maximum range of changing something, because I'm not going to see it if it's any less than 1%, and you're not going to like it, and I'm not going to like it if it's any more than 3%. Okay? So that's a draft, but yeah. All right, so let's take a quick moment to regroup, and then we'll move forward into a couple other things that we're going to test out in sort of a clinical study of these things. Okay?